Modeling.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The big, beautiful bill. Trump descended on the Hill yesterday to help Mike Johnson whip the vote, frankly, and had choice words for stalwart holdouts like, say, Libertarian Congressman Tom Massey from Kentucky, who Trump finds disruptive. Look, nobody is more of a fiscal hawk than Trump, and everybody needs to move this along.
What are you planning to tell the fiscal hawks who want to delay this? What are you planning to tell the fiscal hawks who want to delay this?
I'm a fiscal hawk.
They don't think this is enough spending.
I'm a bigger fiscal hawk. There's nobody like me as a fiscal hawk.
Massey said that has more deficit than Biden did, and this bill kind of...
Because we have to fix the country.
Do you think that Thomas Massey is correct in saying that this is adding Biden?
No, I don't think Thomas Massey understands government. I think he's a grandstander, frankly. He'll probably vote. We don't even talk to him much. I think he should be voted out of office. And I just don't think he understands government. If you ask him a couple of questions, he never gives you an answer. He just says, I'm a no. He thinks he's going to get publicity. And you have that. You have that. They've got some, too.
Well, yeah, I don't know if Thomas Massey needs to be de-elected or if he doesn't understand government, but he certainly isn't playing ball the way that Trump wants congressional Republicans to play, although arguably neither are those blue state Republicans who've been holding up the process and sticking up Mike Johnson for an exponential increase in the SALT deduction so that we're, as we discussed earlier in the program with Jim Urio, so that we have the rest of the country financing the profligate tax and spend policies of socialists in states like New York and Illinois and California. That's no good either. So should they be de-elected? Tom Lawler and company? Scott McKay is the publisher of The Hayride, senior editor of The American Spectator, and author of Racism, Revenge, and Ruin, as well as the novel King of the Jungle. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, there are narrow interests that are competing within the caucuses in both chambers, particularly the House right now. Frankly, for me, like the focus on holdouts who say no, like a Tom Massey or a Chip Roy, is the wrong focus, is the focus on people who don't want to figure out a way to make a paradigm shift in the size and expense of government, like those weak-kneed blue state Republicans are much more problematic. What say you?
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I would make an overarching statement and say this is why when you have 220 out of 435, it's almost impossible to get anything done. Because at 240, you go to the Lawlers and the rest of these guys and you say, look, you don't want to vote for this? Don't vote for it. I don't need your vote. You can virtue signal back, in your district. I'll need your vote on something else, and I better have it then. You have no ability to do that when you're at 220. You have to have everybody's vote every time. And this is how Johnson's going to get. He's going to get jacked up by the Freedom Caucus, and he's going to get jacked up by the Rhinos.
Right.
And it's like, you have to thread a needle with every single piece of legislation. And one of the biggest criticisms has been, Congress doesn't do anything. Like, there's the fewest number of bills they passed. And it's like, yeah, they want to do this one time because you would be in a situation trying to balance this with every single bill that you were trying to pass. If it had any money in it, if it had any kind of complexity to the legislation that you're working on, you can't get everybody to agree on stuff unless it's like the, very basic cultural type things that, you can get everybody to agree on. And what's unprecedented about all this is that there are absolutely no people on the other side of the aisle that you can bring over.
Right.
That's never been the case. You know, like
Except
30, 40,
on
50
eliminating
years ago-
taxes on tips.
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody knows that's political suicide to vote against that. But 30, 40 years ago, Democrats, you had Southern Democrats, and a Republican like Ronald Reagan could get Southern Democrats to vote for all kinds of stuff. You don't have that anymore. That's done. And so everything is a party line vote. And to get it to the point where it's a party line vote, you have to please both Chip Roy and the Mike Lawlers of the world. And that is hard to do. So, you really have to calm your expectations down of Congress when it's this, tight a margin. And look, the good news is everybody hates the Democrats, but the bad news is the congressional map as currently drawn makes it super hard to get above 228, 230 if you're the Republicans. You can't. I don't even think you can get that high if you're the Democrats. There just aren't any swing districts left. And so, what we need is massive reform to, I'm going to say the electoral system, but by that I mean you need to change the census so that when they apportion congressional districts, it's done on the basis of citizenship, and stop counting people who are non-citizens for the purpose of congressional apportionment. You need voter ID nationally. You need all these other kinds of things that change the game so it's possible for the Republicans to get to 240 or 245 so that you can get 90% of your caucus behind something and still win the vote.
Well, Scott McKay, what does the Freedom Caucus want out of the bill?
My sense is they just want to get as much as they can on spending cuts before they go for it. I don't think the Freedom Caucus. I mean, Massey is an outlier even within that. But I think the Freedom Caucus wants to make as many cuts as they can, bank them, and then try to leverage the next fight. I don't know that this is going to happen, but the obvious thing, if I'm Mike Johnson, is I work with them on a rescission bill as soon as this one is done, which is to say we're going to try to ratchet down whatever we can get 218 votes for in the House and hopefully pass it through the Senate. And then right after that, we're going to do a bill that cuts everything else we can agree on from there. Because the interesting thing about a rescission bill, and they haven't done one in forever, is that you can't filibuster a rescission bill. It counts the same as a budget reconciliation thing. So get your cuts in the next bill. Of course, then now you're in a real problem because the rhinos probably aren't going to want to cut anything in a rescission.
Right. Here's my general criticism of this. I mean, I understand the political reality of this, like you described fairly, but I wish somebody, and the president is the person most perfectly situated to do this for obvious reasons, would say, look, Tom Massey's right that this bill in its current form will increase the national debt by $20 trillion over 10 years. And that's the best we can do right now, because you have exactly what you said. You have no interest by a single member of the new Marxist Party in either chamber.
Yep.
And you have no interest by enough Republicans in the House and some big spenders in the Senate, too, that this is the best we can do. This is the Congress you elected, America. So if at some point you want to be serious with respect to action, as you are sort of with rhetorical positioning when you get some survey during the campaign, to reduce the size and scope of government, to bring down the debt and the cost of the $36 trillion in debt that we're already financing. If at some point you want to get serious about that, then you have to do something. And you have to send more members of Congress, more people that fit a certain profile. Pick out your favorite sort of serious, actual fiscal hawk in the House and the Senate, or just pick out the leaders. If you give Mike Johnson more Freedom Caucus types, if you give John Thune more Mike Lee types, then you can do something. But if you don't want to do that in your district or your state, then this is the best we can do, is we can slow down the inevitable decline of this country and put it back on the people.
Well, I'm totally up for that. I think that would absolutely be the right message. But what I would add to that is, if I'm Trump, I'm going to say, and look, they're going to call me a dictator for this, and I'm sure I'm going to be in court over it, but I'm impounding every dime I can out of this budget, right? And it's, and to say, look, they passed some bill in the middle of Watergate that stops the president from being able to do a proper impounding of excess funds that Congress appropriates. I don't think that bill's constitutional, which there's a whole bunch of stuff that's been written about the Presidential Impoundment Act, and, Ross Vogt and all these guys say that it's unconstitutional. I would bring that to the American people and say, look, I'm going to impound $500 billion of spending out of this, and I'm going to bend the baseline down as a result of that. And if anybody wants to take me to court over it, get in line, because we're already there. But I'm going for broke, and you can call me whatever you want, but with this kind of deficit and this kind of debt, something has to be done. Can't get enough votes in the House or Senate to make it happen. So I'm going to do it. And I would love to turn this back over to Congress, but you have to elect the right people. If you add that to what you just said, and I think you have a winner. And there's
nothing wrong with accentuating the positive, because there's a lot of positive in this, with both the tax relief and some spending cuts, and you can provide the contextualization of, this is sort of the initial iteration of DOGE, and we're going to continue this work with Russ Vogt taking point for Elon and so forth. It's not stopping. But this is the best we can do now with what you've given me, and what you said about impoundment, I completely agree with. And then you roll it forward. But you roll it forward sort of providing an expansive explanation, warts and all, of what is being done, why it's being done, and why what's being done is limited in your own mind in terms of what you would really like.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it's on brand with Trump, too, right? Trump is not an ideologue. He's a deal maker.
Right. And,
a deal maker is going to take the best deal he can get. And, this might be it is the best deal he can get, because this is the legislation has reached this point because it's got the best chance of getting the 220 votes. And, this is the reason, if you think Johnson's not, look, and Mike Johnson's a friend of mine, so I'm going to defend him on this. There's a reason you can't get anybody better than Mike Johnson to be speaker, is because nobody wants this job, right? It's impossible. It's an impossible mission to try to get, when you have that low a margin and get zero help from the other side of the aisle, and you have to get all but two to agree on I don't know what it is, a 1,000-page bill or something like this. And you have to get to 218 with that. Good luck. Nobody wants that job. It's a hell of a lot easier to be Chip Roy than it is to be Mike Johnson. And even Chip Roy will tell you that.
Yeah, true. No question. There's no question about that.
So, and that's where we are. And Trump goes to the Hill. And, Trump, he's like, well, I'm going to go to the Hill and I'm going to fix this. And he comes away from the Hill saying, well, I think I made some progress, but it ain't fixed yet. And the real question is, what's an easier lift? Stopping Russia and Ukraine from killing each other, or getting this bill past the House? And, you pay your money and you take your choice, right? So, it's just a really hard thing. And this is the reason why everybody's complaining that Congress isn't doing its job. It's because, you have a stalemate in Congress. And usually speaking, when it's this tight, you can't expect them to pass anything because you can't get consensus on anything.
I wanted to get your take on Jake Tapper now that his most important book is out, and whether or not he has been sufficiently contrite to re-enter the Scott McKay friend circle.
Well, I haven't read the book. My question about it is whether it's an autobiography, seeing as though Jake Tapper was one of the principals in practicing the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental condition over the past 4 years, right? There's so much video of Jake Tapper defending Biden's sentience that all of a sudden he's now going to, expose the cover-up that he was involved in. And it's like, well, okay. I mean, there may be some nuggets of cool information in this, but I can't really recommend that anybody spends their money to give Jake Tapper royalties from this book, based on the fact that he's telling you what he wouldn't tell you when it mattered. And so, and of course the new thing, and I have this piece of the American Spectator that, got a ton of traffic yesterday, about, the lies of the corporate Joe Biden, which is a little different from the actual Joe Biden. The actual Joe Biden is now a sympathetic figure, which is strange because the actual Joe Biden is one of the biggest scumbags in American politics over the last half century. But he's a doddering old man who barely knows where he is. And so, apparently he now has prostate cancer that, was unscreened for and unnoticed for like the entirety of his presidency. And we're supposed to have sympathy because, or at least the corporate Joe Biden wants us to have sympathy for the actual Joe Biden over something that they clearly lied about over the past 5 to 7 years while they were lying about his mental capacity. And the whole thing